What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Slay at Home Speaker Series. We've got a lot of great topics this evening. We'll be covering huts in this episode, but we've got a lot of awesome topics all year long. We'll be covering all kinds of great topics from, how to plan a hut trip to how to plan an expedition trip to Alaska, and a ton of other great topics from all of our great guide partners this season. The Slay at Home Speaker Series is presented by Weston. So make sure you're a member of the Weston Backcountry community on Facebook. That's where you can see all the latest and greatest in the Slay at Home series, or also on the Weston Facebook page or our calendar. So we'll give it a couple more minutes, let everybody tune in here. Let us know where you're tuning in from tonight over in the chat. Also, please keep your microphones off and your videos off during the presentation. Use that chat feature to ask any questions that you have. We will get to as many questions as you can. Looks like we've got John from Golden. Thanks for tuning in, John. Matt and Katie from Loveland. What's up, guys? John, getting a little rain in Grand Junction. Hopefully you get a little snow here soon. Looks like Jen's tuning in from Boulder. Thanks for tuning in, Jen. Peter, glad you guys are getting a little snow down in Crested Butte. We were just down there this past weekend for the CBAC fundraiser. So we're stoked that you guys are finally getting some snow. We caught a little bit of that. We were down in Silverton and Ridgeway for a few days and Telluride. So stoked to be getting a little snow finally, right, gang? JP, what's up, buddy? Tuning in from Fraser. Well, awesome. We'll kind of get rolling here. So again, tonight the topic is Huts 101. So really we're going to be going over, everything related to a hut trip, from booking the huts, when to book them, where to book them, what some of our favorite huts are. Lots of great information. Some of the first backcountry experiences I had were going on hut trips. There's some of the funnest ways to get out and explore the backcountry with a bunch of friends and really experience it more than just a day trip out there. And really they're becoming like, a must do if you're getting into the backcountry, is you got to book a hut trip, right? So my name's Ben. I'm the brand experience manager here at Weston. I really cover all of our events, our guide partnerships, really anything education related, I kind of have my hands in. So I work with a lot of great backcountry guides. I manage our guide team. I've been a guide here in the Vail Valley for about 13 years now, doing all kinds of different guiding out there. But tonight, our main presenter is going to be Justin Ibarra, one of our top guide team members, one of the lead guides there at Colorado Adventure Guides. And just an awesome resource, one of my mentors, for the past decade. If I want any information on backcountry education, Justin is the guy I reach out to. So great asset here tonight, and we are stoked to have him here. Again, if you have questions for Justin during the presentation, just type them there in the chat and we will get to them as quick as we can. So without any further ado, Justin, thanks for joining us tonight. We're really looking forward to the presentation.
So here we go. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. And stoked to see all you guys here this evening. Thank you guys for your time here. We're going to be, like Ben mentioned here, talking about kind of hut tripping 101. So we'll be talking here over the next hour or so, kind of top to bottom of how do I execute a proper winter backcountry hut trip. So as Ben mentioned, you guys, my name is Justin Ibarra. I am an operations manager and one of the lead guides here for Colorado Adventure Guides. We are a four-season outfitter based out of the Summit County area. And we do pretty much everything human powered. So again, 4 seasons of activities. And the wintertime, we specialize in backcountry, avalanche education, ski split board guiding, hut trips. We do snowshoeing, Nordic touring, ice climbing, and more. So thank you guys again for tuning in tonight. I just want to first and foremost kind of get an idea of what kind of audience we're working with today. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here for you guys. I just want to get an idea of how many of you guys have actually been on a hut trip before. So we have never ever, we have yes in winter, yes in summer, or maybe you guys go all the time and you're just trying to get some other tips and tricks here. So it looks like most of the team here chiming in are kind of the never ever side, which is awesome. This is the perfect spot to start here. So a handful of you guys looks like have been out on the hut trips in the wintertime here. So see if I can share the results so the rest of you guys can kind of see it. So yeah, it looks like most of the team here is kind of on the never ever side. So perfect spot to start here. The next thing I want to know from you guys is kind of where you're at in the realm of why you want to kind of get out and execute a winter backcountry hut trip. So I'm going to launch another poll here for you guys in relation to, again, why you want to start exploring into the winter backcountry. So maybe it's the skiing and riding aspect of it. Maybe you just want to get out and enjoy nature and kind of escape those everyday nuances of life. Bond with friends or family, or maybe like most of us, it's kind of all of the above here. So, and that's what it looks like most of you guys are kind of trickling in there, is kind of the all the above here. So like Ben mentioned, hut trips are a great way to experience the backcountry. And whether you're doing it for skiing, getting out and just getting out of the city, or getting out of your everyday life, or just getting out and bonding with friends and family, they're all great reasons to get out and enjoy the huts. So cool. Without further ado, guys, we're going to jump right in it here. So Hut Trip 101, again, we're going to talk about hut tripping from an hour here or so. And the way we're going to format this, you guys, is kind of a top to bottom. So where do I start all the way to where do I end here? So let's do it. Let's go ahead and start booking a hut trip here. So first and foremost, one of the first things you want to do is figure out what kind of hut you're going to be traveling into, or what kind of hut you want to potentially look at booking. So there's a lot of different resources out there, guys. And when I'm looking at huts, and when we're typically looking at huts, there's kind of a few things we want to think about, because there's a lot of different huts out there. First and foremost, where are the huts located? We are here in Colorado, and we have a pretty robust system of huts around. And so there's different areas and different huts that you can choose based on where you're at. So maybe you're down in the southwest part of the state. There's a bunch of huts you could choose from there. Or maybe you're here in the Summit County area, central Colorado. There's a series of huts you can choose from here. Maybe you're in the Front Range. So first and foremost, where do you want to get out? All right. So that's kind of the first thing I like to think about, is where do I want to explore? All right. So location is kind of the first thing I look towards as far as a general zone of where we're going to be, or where we're interested in traveling into. And then I start to look at what huts are within that zone. All right. And another thing I like to think of is, what are our objectives for the hut? Are we trying to get out and potentially do some skiing or riding? Are we just trying to get some family and friends together and maybe spend a holiday at a hut? Okay. So those will also really dictate what hut you choose, because some huts are more on the ski side of thing. They're a little bit further out. They kind of cross into more avalanche terrain potentially, and some huts are a little bit easier accessible. So again, your objectives should also play a factor into what kind of hut you're choosing. And then availability. Unfortunately, the huts do get booked up pretty quick. And there's different hut systems, and there's private huts and so forth out there. But this day and age, they seem to book pretty quickly. So you are going to want to jump on this sooner than later. And a lot of these huts, like the 10th Mountain Huts, if you've heard of those, they'll book a year in advance. So that's something you want to kind of jump on sooner than later, because there's a good chance that maybe you figured out where you want to go and you have an idea of the objectives you want to utilize or you want to tackle when you're going out to hut, and then you find out that you don't actually have the availability to do so. So proper planning is going to be key. And with huts in mind, especially in Colorado, you do typically want to start thinking about this like a year in advance. So these are kind of the three topics, again, 3 bullet points I like to think of when starting to think about booking a trip. So again, location, what our objectives are, and what the availability is of those huts. And then we have a lot of different resources we can utilize to kind of figure out what huts are out there. All right. So the internet is one of our best friends this day and age. And so we can do a quick Google search. And if you did search, one of the top things would pop up when you Google search here in Colorado is huts.org. And that's going to be the 10th Mountain Hut Division. All right. And so these guys, this is a hut system that has a bunch of them. So hop on this guy if you haven't already, and start tooling around and kind of researching what different huts are out there and what kind of locations you're dealing with. So as you can see, there's a lot here in the 10th Mountain Huts. They also do some privately owned huts through 10th Mountain Division booking. We have the Summit Huts, the Grand Huts, the Braun and Friends Huts. And so great resource here, the 10th Mountain Division Hut Association. That's just huts.org. And then locally here in Summit County is the Summit Huts. I don't know if you may or may not have heard of these, but there's a handful of different huts that's in the Summit County area. And so these are huts that we actually operate out of as Colorado Adventure Guides. We do guided tours, avalanche education, and so forth. So the Summit Huts is another useful website to kind of look at different hut options and availability. And then there's also a lot of different huts out there that are not in these hut systems, so privately owned huts. And again, utilize the internet to your advantage. A quick Google search will start to show a whole variety of different options that you guys have. And most of those are going to be privately owned huts. So like this one right here, this is Anna's Cabin. I'm not going to hide any secrets here. Anna's Cabin is a really cool hut. It's over on the Fremont Pass side. It's owned by one of our buddies, David Carner. And so this one you could book directly on Airbnb. And it's not a very hard approach, about 1.5 miles up to the hut, a little bit over 1,000 foot, and it's great midwinter zone and a lot of different cool stuff to do around there. There's ice climbing crag. You can snowmobile to this hut. There's a lot of great low angle skiing. There's a lot of great midwinter skiing in this guy. This one right here, Tundra Hut, another privately owned hut. This is really cool. It's over near the Guanella Pass area. And this one actually just took over new ownership. This one's a little bit further of a trek, but similar to Anna's, you can snowmobile to this bad boy. And there's a lot of variety of terrain there. If you're there for skiing, there's a lot of mellow stuff for midwinter. You also have some steeper stuff for spring skiing. And so, yeah, I guess the first thing we want to start to figure out is what hut we're going to be traveling into. And a quick wrap on that is just think about the location of it, what our potential objectives are for the hut trip, and what the availability of these guys are. Pretty crucial one. And once you figure out the hut you're going to go to, you're going to do a little research. You can utilize the internet to your advantage. Once you do some research, you're going to find some more information on that hut, like the exact location of it, where the trailhead is, what seasons you can access that hut, what kind of terrain are you dealing with around that hut? Are you crossing avalanche terrain to get to the cabin, or are you not? And what kind of amenities are you working with in that hut, right? What kind of stove are you have? What kind of restroom do you have? Is there pots and pans there? What kind of bedding is there, right? So you'll find, for the most part, you'll find all this information on the websites in particular, or in relation to that particular hut. You'll also find some relevant photos and kind of get an idea what it looks like, and you'll find a lot more information on these guys. So again, once you figure out the hut you're potentially going to be traveling into, and maybe you booked it, do a little bit of research, figure out a little bit more in depth, what that whole hut entails. So now we have found the hut. Now it's time to plan the trip. Ooh, this little photo right here, this is actually Anna's cabin right here. Another photo of Anna's. Again, a great privately owned cabin up in the Fremont Pass area. So cool. So we found the hut we're going to utilize. We booked it. Now we need to start planning. All right. So one of the first things I like to do is figure out who is actually going to be going into the hut with us. All right. Assemble the news team here. So first and foremost, how many people are we going to be bringing with us? All right. And so there's different options when you start reserving the hut. You can reserve the whole hut. You can reserve some of the hut. There is some COVID restrictions in mind right now. So do some research if you are going to be booking something within the next year or so. But yeah, how many people are we going to be bringing with us? All right. So that's kind of the first thing I like to figure out. Once I figure out how many people are coming with us, then I kind of start to think about modes of travel. Again, that's kind of inside of what our objectives are for the trip. Are we trying to get some skiing and riding in? If so, then we're probably going to need everybody to be on some sort of touring equipment, ski, splitboard, or telly. If not, maybe we can hike and snowshoeing. All right. So things to consider in the mode of travel, and really how many people are going to be bringing. It's kind of based on your objective for the hut and the experience of the crew. Are we bringing in a whole bunch of people who have never hut tripped before, or are we bringing people who have some hut experience? Maybe they don't have hut experience, but they have backcountry traveling experience. So things to consider where the experience level is of our crew. And then again, goals and objectives, super important, because again, who you bring out there will really be dictated by what are we trying to get out of the trip. Again, are we trying to get skiing and riding in? Are we trying to get out there and have a Thanksgiving dinner holiday? So all of that will kind of dictate who we're deciding to bring out with us. Once we've assembled a team, the next thing I kind of start to think about, or we should start to think about, is planning the route, or overall planning of the trip here. So when we're thinking about planning the route, kind of breaking it into a few different things here is the mapping and the forecast, and then a couple other important considerations during the planning stages. So again, we figured out our trip, we figured out our hut, we know where it's at, we did some research, we figured out where it is, where the trailhead is, some general information of the amenities and so forth. Then we kind of assembled our team, we reached out to our friends or family members, we started locking those in. Now it's time to plan that route out here. So the first thing I like to start thinking about is the mapping side of things. And there's a lot of useful digital digital resources out there to utilize. Of those, the most common ones is going to be CalTopo and Google Earth. We did do a really more in-depth tour planning episode of Slay at Home last year. And so I'm actually going to see if I can include that in the chat box here. Boom. If you guys are curious, we're not going to be able to do an in-depth tour planning in this episode here, but take a look at that chat box there. There's going to be a link to the episode that we did last year that's going to get a little bit more in depth of how do I actually plan a tour by utilizing these digital resources here. All right, so bringing it back here, again, one of the most useful resources out there for digital tour planning is going to be CalTopo. All right, and if you don't know what this is, again, take a look at that episode, and it's going to be one of your new best friends here. So on CalTopo, you can literally tour plan, and you can map out your whole trip. All right, so you can put little marker points, like you see this P here, that's going to mark the parking for the trailhead. All right, and so we're kind of putting on our imagination hats here, and we booked the Sisters Cabin, the Sisters Hut, which is just outside of Breckenridge here. So we did some research. We figured out where that parking spot was. All right, so we marked that guy on here. And then we did a little bit more research. We figured out where that up track was, where the trail was to get to that hut. So we added a line here on CalTopo. It's going to show us how do we actually get to that bad boy. And then we put another little marker here to actually lets us know exactly where that hut is at. All right. Again, if you're not familiar with CalTopo, you're going to see some colors, some red and some yellow and some oranges on there. What that is it's slope angle shading, and that kind of highlights avalanche terrain for us. So pretty crucial tool, especially for the winter traveling in Colorado here in the backcountry. So yeah, this is kind of getting where I'm starting. I'm going to see where the trailhead is. How do I get up to that hut? Where is that hut? And it's kind of getting an overall idea of what the terrain looks like around that bad boy as well, especially if you're going to be out there doing some potential skiing or riding. There's a lot of other useful resources on CalTopo, you guys. Again, this isn't necessarily a tour planning session, but I did include that link in the chat box here. And so one of the cool things about CalTopo here is this guy right here. This is the position and elevation, and this is based on the hut. So I put a little marker, that little orange hut I put on here. All this information is directly related to where that hut is at. So it's going to give me my exact elevation, slope angle, and aspect of the Sisters Cabin. It's also going to give me all my UTM coordinates, which are great things to write down for emergency response plan. So if you have to call somebody, you have the exact location of where that hut is. And then some important terrain statistics. How far is it to get up to the hut? How many miles is it going to take? How much elevation gain is it to get to that hut? And so all of this right here is based on this green line. All right, so we drew that green line in there, and it's going to give us an idea of, again, the overall profile. It's going to give us some elevation statistics, where we started at the parking trailhead sign, what our average, max, and what our overall elevation gain is, what kind of slope angle we're working with on that track that we set, what aspect we're looking at, vegetational clues. So all very useful resources for tour planning. And then you can actually export this into Google Earth. And this is what we're seeing here right now. And so the CalTopo is just going to give you that 2D imagery. All right. So that 2D imagery is great, but when we can couple that with our Google Earth and we can get an idea what the 3D imagery looks like, you're going to get very intimate with that terrain without ever actually going into that terrain. Along with terrain photos. So that's going to be your quick Google search of the Sisters Cabin. You're going to see some real life photos of people out there in the terrain. And I kind of like to think of that as a trifecta between CalTopo, Google Earth, and terrain photos. You get a great idea of what the terrain is going to look like before you even go out into the terrain. All right. And then also, again, if you're looking to ski, as you can kind of see some of these other green areas here, those are areas that I polygoned out that could be potential ski areas or ski zones, if that was one of your objectives for the day. You could also highlight potential avalanche terrain that you might want to avoid depending upon the weather and avalanche hazard for the day. But this is kind of where you want to start before you get out into the field, is the mapping side of things. And you can export this stuff into some tour planning resources like Gaia, if you've ever heard of that, or Avenza, which are offline geospatial mapping tools where I could basically transport this in my phone. And even if I'm not in cell service, I can pull that bad boy up and it's gonna blue dot you where you're at in that terrain. So, oh, looks like we're a little off trail. I'm gonna pull up my Avenza real quick, or pull up my Gaia real quick and take a look. Yep, cool, we're right on that green track. We are where we want to be. All right. And so there's a reason why we do this before to get into the field. Now, these digital resources are great, you guys, but we cannot make them or let them be our end-all decision-making tools. They are electronics, so they can fail. So we always want to have a backup, and that's going to be your mapping compass here. All right. So make sure you are prepared with a map of the area and a compass as well. And hopefully you ideally know how to use them as well. So map and compass, you can never forget those guys because batteries aren't going to die on those. So let's kind of run through the mapping side of things. And again, guys, if you aren't familiar with any of those resources I just covered, watch that Slay at Home series that we did last year, which again is in that chat box. Cool. So now that we've kind of have an idea of the zone we're going to be traveling into, how we get up, where we park, where the hut is at, and then maybe depending upon your objectives, where some areas that you might want to potentially check out the ski are. Now we want to start looking at the forecast. All right. And with forecast in mind, we kind of want to make sure we're looking at the weather and the avalanche forecast. And ideally, we're tracking this weather and avalanche forecast because we're tracking these conditions all the way up to the date of our hut trip. All right. So if you have a hut trip in February, hopefully, again, you have an idea of potentially what the weather and avalanche or snowpack conditions are looking like all the way until you get to that trip. At the very least, we recommend you look at a week prior. All right. So what happened in the past, what's the present, and then what's the future. So first off, we'll talk about weather. What are we looking at for weather here? And so there's a lot of different useful weather forecasts out there to utilize. One that I personally like to use is NOAA. And when I'm looking at the weather, like I already mentioned, I kind of like to think of it in three parts. What has it been doing? What is it doing currently? And what is it going to do? Especially in the future, in the sense of how many days are you going out? So if you're going to be out there for 3 days, kind of look at what the next 3 days, 3, 4, 5 days are looking like for weather. And so again, what I like to utilize is NOAA. It's one of the resources I like to utilize for weather here. So NOAA, if you haven't been on here, has a lot of different resources we can utilize. And so at the top of NOAA, at the top of this website here, basically you just type in like a general area. There's a search box up here. So if I typed in Breckenridge, Colorado, it would kind of give me a general area forecast. And then below this is the one mirroring here. There's a little map right here. You can actually get a little bit more of a point forecast. So you can kind of hover over where that cabin or hut is at. You can click on it and it's going to give you a little bit more of a digital point forecast. All right. So this is going to give us where we're at currently and what our future forecast is. This is going to break it down via text a little bit more. And then up here, there's these links here. This is where I like to figure out what happened in the past. So you can see 3-day history here. And you can also look at an hourly forecast. So it kind of breaks up your future forecast in a little bit more detail. And so this right here is what the 3-day history is going to look like. All right. So based on date, time, what did the wind do? What was the visibility looking like? What was the sky condition in relation to visibility, air temperature, humidity, dew point, wind chill? So all this kind of gives us real-time data. What actually happened? All right. So how cold did it get the past few nights? Maybe it didn't get a good freeze and we had planned a hut trip where we're going to go do some spring skiing. Maybe we reevaluate. Or how much wind, how much snow did we get? Is that going to increase the hazard? Are we potentially crossing underneath or in or through avalanche terrain to get to this hut? Maybe we have to reevaluate. And unfortunately, worst case scenario, maybe postpone or cancel our trip. All right. We never want to let kind of call it summit fever hurt us. Basically, our mind can hurt us as much as it can help us. And so maybe you plan this trip for a year, you booked it, it was the only availability on that hut, but that hut is crossing, or you have to cross avalanche terrain to get to it. And the past week, our avalanche danger bumped up to high and we're dealing with a persistent avalanche problem. Like, you need to realize, yeah, I've planned this for the past year, but maybe we need to pull the plug on that. So it's unfortunate, but it's just the nature of the beast in backcountry travel. And sometimes we have to deal with that. So that's kind of the history. And then again, our future here, this is our hourly forecast here. So it's kind of give us our 48-hour period in the future. And it breaks it down a little bit more into detail, like I said. So the top box here is how warm is it going to get? What is the wind chill going to do over the next few days? What's the wind looking like? Is it going to increase as the days goes on? Is it going to decrease? How about the sky cover or precip potential? What's going on out there with weather? Is there going to be a system coming in that we're going to see a bunch of snow, or maybe we're looking at a beautiful bluebird 3 days for an awesome hut trip? All right. We want to make sure we're looking at all this stuff. And then this guy right here is just kind of a zone forecast summary. It's going to have you, or it's going to help you have an understanding of kind of the bigger picture, that 30,000 foot view, kind of in relation to the areas you're going to be traveling into. So weather is crucial, guys. That and avalanche forecast, they might cancel your trip for you, unfortunately. Again, just never be afraid. If these aren't lining up, even though maybe you plan this hut trip for a long time, maybe you have to cancel it. Or maybe it's a hut trip that you, again, we're just trying to get some family out for a holiday weekend and you're not getting anywhere in or near avalanche terrain, but you still want to clue into this stuff. So it's going to affect your travel. It's going to affect your gear, a lot. All right. So after weather, the next thing we like to look at is our avalanche forecasts. And here in Colorado, we have one of the most robust forecasting centers in the world in all reality. Kind of makes sense because we have one of the most complex snowpacks in the world. But avalanche forecast for us, we're going to go to the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. If you're traveling in the lower 48, go to avalanche.org. It's going to give you an idea what the whole lower 48 looks like. And it's going to give you an idea of the forecasting centers and the areas that they do forecast for. So for us here in Colorado, it's going to be the CAIC. Now, when I'm thinking of the avalanche forecast, I'm thinking of the avalanche forecast along that route, and then in potentially the area that we might want to ski. All right. So kind of, again, thinking of the whole big picture side of things. So CAIC, if you guys have never been to this website before, should be one of the things you are frequently using if you're traveling in the winter backcountry here in Colorado. And so the state is broken up into a series of zones. So as we can kind of see right here, the eastern part of the state, not so much because there's no mountains there. The western part of our state, that's where all of our mountain ranges are, and that's where our forecasting zones are. So you're going to want to find the zone that your hut is located in. If you were traveling in Colorado, you would click on that guy, and it's going to bring you into a zone forecast. A few more things on this website right here. This is our homepage. Just a few plugs here. This is going to be like recent media, photos or videos, recent news. And at the top here, we can kind of get our forecast or real-time observations, avalanche and weather. So a lot of useful resources on this site, similar to NOAA. I encourage you guys, if you haven't been on here, to hop on and play around. So once you figure out the zone you're traveling into, you click it. And again, it's going to bring you to this zone forecast. And the first thing it's going to show us is our danger rating based on our elevation band. It's going to give you the danger rating for the day and then the potential trend for the next day. It's going to give you a quick summary of what the snowpack is looking like. And then below that, it's going to give you an idea of what kind of avalanche problem we might be working with out there. If you haven't taken an avalanche course before, there are 9 different kinds of avalanches. All right. Each avalanche is kind of its own different beast, different characteristics. Some are harder to manage than others. Some are more destructive than others. So take an avalanche course if you guys aren't familiar with this. But this gives us an idea of what avalanche problem we're dealing with, where in the terrain we're likely to see it, aspect and elevation, what's the likelihood of triggering it, and what's the size potential. All right. So super, super important stuff there. And then after the avalanche problem, you can click on another tab. It's going to get a little bit more in depth into your forecast discussion. So the earlier one was just a summary. This one goes a little bit more in depth, and then they kind of show you some recent media or video if there is any. So you definitely want to read this stuff. Again, get an idea of what the snowpack is looking like out there and the area you're traveling into. And then this has our observations as well. This is the real-time data. All right, so are we seeing recent avalanches? This is avalanche observations that people are submitting. So again, if the hut you're traveling into is traveling in or near avalanche terrain, you hop on this guy right here and you see avalanches that are occurring on similar aspects and elevations, you either have to travel near or through, reevaluate your plan. All right, super important. Recent avalanches, or what we call class 1 data. It's a direct sign of instability in the snowpack. So if you're seeing recent avalanches happening and you're seeing a pattern, similar aspects and elevations, clue in that that's probably a dangerous aspect elevation. All right. And then field reports, this is what people are submitting out there, what they're seeing. And then weather observations as well is going to be based off weather stations. And so this is what those weather stations are going to look like. So you can figure out, these are all broken into zone and these are the stations that they utilize. So again, this is giving you real-time data, what actually we were seeing or what was observed out there. And so this is going to be kind of on the past bucket there of weather, or excuse me, yeah, of weather or avalanche. So avalanche forecast, crucial. Again, if you are traveling in or near avalanche terrain to get to your hut, or maybe you didn't have to cross into it to get to the hut, but you planned on potentially skiing or riding, and the skiing or riding objective maybe is no longer. Maybe you revert to your less exposed objective, which is just to go out and experience of Mother Nature, you know, and have a great time out in the hut in the wintertime. So weather and avalanche are crucial. Cool. So now once we have got the forecast, some other considerations we kind of think about in relation to planning the trip here, and I've kind of been setting you up a little bit for it, is what kind of terrain we're traveling into. All right. Are we potentially getting in near, do we have to travel through avalanche terrain to get to this hut? So super important, especially if the weather and the avalanche forecasts aren't lining up. Beyond that, weather and snow conditions. All right. What are we seeing out there? Is there a big storm coming in like this weekend? Right? Maybe you planned on skiing something down there in the San Juans this weekend. Now this big storm's coming through. A lot of the huts down there, you do have to travel in or near or through avalanche terrain. You have to potentially reevaluate. Worst case scenario, maybe you got to pull the plug and cancel that trip. It's unfortunate, it really is. Again, especially because most of these huts you have to plan a year in advance, but your life is potentially at risk. Your team's life is potentially at risk. The huts will always be there, maybe. But just think about that. And then again, your group and team. You guys think about that, right? Who are we bringing with us? Have you been out with them before? Do they have experience in the backcountry? Do they have experience on their mode of travels? Do they align with what our objectives are? All right, so definitely important things to consider. And then, are we in cell service? What is our emergency plan if something is to go wrong? If you aren't in cell service, you should make sure you have a personal locator beacon or some sort of way to reach outside help. Make sure somebody has your itinerary. And again, develop that emergency plan. All right, so if something does go wrong, what do we do? How do we get out of the field? All right, who do we call? So things we want to do, we want to make sure we do before we get in the field. Cool, so that kind of wraps up the planning stages, guys. So we did some research. We figured out what hut we're going to go to based on the location, our objectives, and the availability. We booked it. Then we figured out who we're going to bring with us. Then we started to plan our trip. We figured out the area, how we get there, the kind of terrain that we're looking like around there. We looked at the forecast. What's the weather? What did it do? What is it doing? What is it going to do in the future? And the same with the avalanche forecast. And you want to make sure that you guys write all this stuff down. Write it down, or maybe if you use your phone, screenshot it. So when I'm on a hut trip, I do both. I have my notebook, I write all the stuff down, and then I use the digital resources. So I do all my tour planning. I put that onto my Venzo or Gaia. I look at the forecast. I screenshot all those NOAAs. I screenshot all the CEICs, and then I write it all down. Right? This is what happened. This is what the current weather is. This is what the next 3 days are forecasted for. Same with avalanche. All right. And so with weather, I kind of look at what's the sky cover, what's the temperature doing, what is the wind speeds or directions looking like, and is there any chance for precip? So those are kind of the bullet points I like to look at for weather. And then again, just realizing those other kind of important considerations: avalanche terrain. Who am I going with? What's the snowpack looking like? What's the weather looking like? What's our evac plan? All right. So then after we plan our trip, or at least plan the route, now we need to think about what kind of equipment are we going to be bringing with us. So what are we going to bring in the sense of equipment, and what kind of food are we going to be bringing out there with us? So on the equipment side of things, these resources I'm going to show you now are off of the Summit Huts website. So you guys can find those there, which is super cool. So general equipment here, again, what kind of mode of travel are we working with? Are we trying to get out there and ski or splitboard? Or are we okay with some snowshoes? Or maybe it's a firm pack and we can potentially boot pack. I would always recommend at least bringing snowshoes out because you just never know. So the mode of travel, boots, what kind of footwear we're dealing with. Are we skiing with AT boots? Are we splitboarding with phantom boots? Or are we on snowshoes? We want to make sure we have waterproof boots in some form or fashion, especially if we're traveling out in the wintertime. Making sure we have poles, ski poles, flipboards, maybe collapsible poles. We want to make sure we have an adequate backpack. All right. So when we're traveling these huts, we're going to have a lot more stuff to be bringing with us versus our day trip. So think about the size. So if I'm only bringing my backpack, the size I'm looking for is probably around a 60 to 70 liter pack. And versus our day touring pack, you're going to be looking more like 30 to 40 liters. So the size of your pack is going to be a consideration. And then the other thing to think about is maybe I'm going to be pulling a sled. So a pulk sled, you can buy those, you can make them. And basically what you're doing is you're just pulling a sled behind you on the snow. It's a great way to get the weight off of your pack or off of your back, excuse me. And if you have a sled, maybe you don't have to have that 60 or 70 liter pack. Maybe you can get by with that 40 liter, and then your sled's going to have your overnight food and overnight gear. And then if you're skiing or splitboarding or tailing, you want to, of course, want to make sure you have skins, maybe wax, depending upon what time of year you're going. If you're going in the spring, make sure you have skin wax, gobstopper, or something along those lines. And then research the amenities of the hut. But most of them, you're going to want to make sure you bring a sleeping bag with you. Some of them also want you to bring a pillowcase or a pillow as well. Again, just kind of do some research depending, or it's going to vary upon the hut you're going to be traveling into. And then kind of along the lines of the 10 essentials, you're going to be out there in the field. You're going to be out there at night. You need some sort of light. So a headlamp with extra batteries. And that's just not even hut trips. Even on your day trips, you should be having, a headlamp, a knife, sunglasses, goggles. But yeah, pocket knife or some sort of multi-tool device in the sense of a repair kit, sunglasses, goggles, especially in Colorado, the amount of sun and snow we get, some water bottles as well to make sure you guys have adequate water. Want to make sure we're counteracting any potential dehydration out there. Sunscreen, lip balm, again, especially in Colorado, we get a little bit of sun. Food, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but make sure it's something that you guys like eating. And you're going to have usually a difference between group food and personal food. So group food is typically like our breakfast and our dinners, and usually lunches. We kind of, for the most part, you'll see people doing lunches on their own, or at least snacks on their own. And then again, you definitely want to make sure, even if you're not traveling near avalanche terrain, I'm a huge advocate of making sure you have your avalanche equipment. So your transceiver, your probe, and your shovel. And then we kind of talked about, are we in cell service? If not, make sure you have some sort of personal locator beacon, like a Spot or an InReach, something along those lines. And maybe bring one of those solar chargers, especially if you're going to be out there for a few days. We want to make sure that we are able to utilize these mapping resources that we took all that time to use or to plan with. All right, so that kind of hits some general gear. On the personal side of things, layering is kind of one of the main things you want to think about. So in the layering side of things, I like to just think about the 3-part layering system. So the first thing is going to be your base layer, that tighter fitting. First and foremost, cotton kills. Have you guys have ever heard that? Once cotton gets wet, it loses pretty much all of its warming properties. And so for me, I never bring cotton out in the backcountry with me. If you were going to use it in the hut, maybe like a cotton t-shirt, but I just forego the cotton when I'm at home. So the 3-part system is kind of our base layers, our tighter fitting layer. The next one is going to be our insulating layer. So something like a fleece or some sort of down jacket, something along those lines. And then the third is going to be your shell. That's going to be your waterproof, windproof layer. So you want to make sure you have that trifecta there. Whenever I'm doing multi-day hut trips, huge advocate of having multiple pairs of socks. Your feet are pretty important out there, right? So for me, I bring literally a pair of socks per day. I'm not gonna lie. I like to keep my feet happy because that's what I'm on most of the day. So socks, and then beyond that, guys, gloves. Similar to kind of your day tours, you want to have a few different gloves, maybe a thinner liner glove for the uphill, a thicker glove for a riding glove. And when I'm on multi-day trips, I like to bring a mitten as well. What kind of hat am I bringing? I always recommend a ball cap for when you're touring, and a beanie for when we get the ride down. Hut slippers. A lot of the huts out there, especially in Colorado, some of the more utilized huts out there, like the 10th Mountain huts, they have hut slippers there. So do some research again, look at the amenities of the hut, but it's nice. It feels good to have some sort of different footwear beyond your ski or snowboarding boot. So some sort of hut slipper is always nice to have. And then personal items like your toiletry stuff, you want to make sure you have as well. And then again, research the hut, but depending on the one you're going to, you might want to bring, or you might need to bring your own pillow and or pillowcase. So that kind of hits your personal clothing side of things, guys. The next thing we like to think about is kind of our group gear, our emergency survival gear. So we want to make sure at the very least among the whole team, not everybody needs one, but with group gear, you need at least one adequate for the size of the crew, is a bivvy, some sort of shelter, a first aid kit, again, adequate for the group size, maybe some fire starting material, a repair kit. And again, not everybody needs a repair kit, but you need one adequate for the group size and everybody's mode of travel. So there's some great examples of what to include in that repair kit, maybe some baling wires, some zip ties, pole repair kit, ski straps. Definitely carry at least 5 or 6 ski straps in your backpack, and that's across the board. Whenever you're day touring, multi-day touring, ski straps are like the gold of they're like duct tape of the backcountry. So yeah, carry a bunch of those. And again, not everybody needs a repair kit, not everybody needs a first aid kit, but you do need one adequate for the group size, and then the repair for everybody's mode of travel. And then a few more things on the group equipment side of things, guys. Some huts ask you to carry your hut trip confirmation. Also, make sure you have the potential code or the combination to get you into that hut, so you don't travel in 5 miles just to get to the door that's locked to realize that, oh no, we don't have the combo and we are at a cell service. So make sure you have that. Make sure, again, you have the trailhead information, the route descriptions, which hopefully you did in your pre-trip planning. With all those digital resources, again, never forget to always have a backup map and compass. GPS, again, are we in cell service? With an in-reach, or maybe you just like having the GPS with you. Altimeter, maybe a watch, and then radios. Huge advocate of radios, guys. To me, teamwork and communication are my 2 best friends, or our 2 best friends when traveling in the backcountry. I'm not gonna lie, I push radios over airbag packs. To me, communication is just that important. So radios, and then water purification method for the winter time. At most huts, you're just melting snow for water. But if you're traveling in the summertime and you're going to be utilizing some lakes or streams, you're going to want to make sure you have some sort of water purification method. And so that kind of wraps up the equipment, guys. Again, it's going to kind of depend on what you're doing as far as mode of travel. What are we bringing? And then all your personal gear or group gear. Just make sure you have all that and you communicate that within the group. And then beyond that, we kind of think about, what are we going to eat out there with us? All right. And so it really varies depending upon who you're going with and how long you're going out there for. All right. So first and foremost, you want to bring what you like to eat. Otherwise, you're probably not going to eat it. All right. So again, it kind of depends on how crazy you want to get the food prep. Do we want it to be easy, or do we want to get more elaborate with it? And that'll kind of dictate your menu. So again, eat what you like. You're going to be out there. You're going to be expending a lot of energy. You're going to be burning a lot of calories. So things to think about is kind of get some wholesome, hearty, and high calorie food. Because again, you're going to be burning, you're spending a lot of energy. Even if you're not skiing, just traveling up to the hut, being at altitude, being in the winter, being in the cold, you're going to be expending and burning energy. Other things to consider, the preparation side of things. Again, it kind of is going to depend on the crew. Maybe I'm just with a couple of my buddies and we're going to go to a hut that is closer to some spring skiing access. And we just want to get out there and have some easy food. So maybe we're like spaghetti and meatball side of things. Or maybe I'm out there with my family and we get a little bit more elaborate with it, right? And we can get really as crazy as we want. So just kind of think of the preparation side of things and how elaborate with it and the ingredients you want to get. And also think about what, again, the amenities are at the hut. What kind of kitchen are you dealing with? Other things to consider: weight. You are going to be bringing everything in and bringing everything out. So consider that way. Are we traveling on foot, or are we bringing snowmobiles up? We're bringing snowmobiles. Woo, throw the keg in there. Yeah, probably not if you're going to be touring up there with a polk sled behind you, right? So consider that weight and think about how are we getting it all up there. And then you kind of want to distribute that amongst the team. So weight is something to consider. We also want to think about minimizing trash. All these huts are on the leave no trace side of things. You're packing in, you're packing out everything you are bringing in with you guys. And then just kind of thinking about the depackage and repackage. All right. So when you're doing your food shopping and you bring it home, a lot of these packages are very robust. And with the robustness of them, they're not going to fit very well in your backpack or your sled. So a lot of times they're going to be pulling these guys out and repackaging them. Maybe you even get crazy with it and you start doing some freeze dried stuff and seal it up and so forth. But depackage, repackage. You can also prep your food beforehand. Maybe you're doing some chicken fajitas, right? You can do all that slicing. You can do all that seasoning and so forth beforehand. And that way, when you get to the hut, it's already prepped. You're just throwing it on the stove. So other considerations for food. All right. So with the food, again, it's going to vary upon how many people you have and how many days you're going to be going out. That'll kind of determine how much food you're going to bring. I always like to bring a little bit extra just in case. You never know. And with these hut trips, the way I like to plan dinner anyways is cocktail, entree, dinner, dessert, right? Make it a fun one. Even on the ones that maybe with that example is me and some friends going to ski some steep stuff and we're doing spaghetti and meatballs. Still, like, we're bringing a little bit of a cocktail. We'll potentially bring some bread or salad for an appetizer, and then we'll have our entree and then some dessert, right? It just kind of really completes that atmosphere in the hut. So that's kind of a wrap on, what to bring in relation to the equipment and what kind of food we potentially might want to bring out there with us. All right, so now we've planned, we've kind of figured out where we're going to go. We did all of our pre-planning, right? Where is it? Where's the trailhead? How do we get there? What terrain? We looked at the weather. We looked at the avalanche forecast. We figured out what we want to bring. Maybe we delegated who's bringing what. We figured out what kind of food we're going to bring. We did our grocery shopping. We delineated who's going to carry what. Maybe we broke our groups as well into smaller cook groups. And that's a great way to do things, especially if you're out there for multiple nights. A good way to do that is figure out how many people you have, breaking them up into smaller teams. And then one group's responsible for cooking that night. One group's responsible for cleaning that night. One group is responsible for maybe gathering wood and keeping the water going, right? And then maybe you have enough for 4 groups. The other group's just chilling, all right? And then the next morning, the people who are chilling now are cooking, and the other people who are cooking or maybe are now cleaning, right? And it's just kind of rotating through. And it's a great way to kind of divvy up the responsibilities. Teamwork makes the dream work. Like I said, teamwork, communication. Our 2 best friends are traveling in the backcountry. And when we're utilizing these huts, it's all of us executing it together. It's not just 1 or 2 people. So with that being said, some things with hut etiquette we want to keep in mind, guys. And you'll find a lot of the stuff on the hut websites, especially like 10th Mountain Summit Hut, is that we want to basically keep these huts nice and clean and beautiful for other people and future generations to come. All right. So these are kind of the main things with all huts. All right. Is keep it clean. So in most huts, there's going to be some sort of broom there. There's going to be some sort of shovel there. Right. So basically, hopefully when you arrive there, all this was done. And when you leave, you're going to make sure it's all done. So sweep it all up. Make sure that if you tracked in a bunch of dirt and a bunch of snow, we clean that up. Make sure you clean up the fire pit area. Just keep it clean. And at the very least, before you leave, all the stuff needs to get done. Washing dishes. All right. This is a great method to washing dishes right here, because most of the cabins, most of the huts you're going to be utilizing don't have running water. And so we're melting snow for water. And the 3-step method to washing dishes is pretty crucial. It's kind of the same thing if you've ever done overnight river trips. So we have 3 bins. One bin is our wash bin, one bin is our rinse bin, and one bin is our desanitation bin with our bleach. And then we put it into the rack to dry. All right, so that's kind of the 3-part. And then again, on the leave no trace side of things, of course, we're going to be packing out all of our trash, but that also includes micro trash. And so from a micro trash standpoint, all your food scraps, when you're cleaning all your dishes, you're going to strain that out. You strain the water through, you're going to take all your food scraps and you're going to put that in your trash as well. So leave no trace isn't just the big stuff. It's all your micro trash as well. And then keeping the wood restocked. All right. So again, hopefully when you get to the hut, the wood was restocked from the prior party. But before you leave, make sure that wood is all replenished. And this is all just, hut etiquette 101. And then water as well, guys. Again, for the winter, you're going to be melting snow for water. And again, most huts, they want you to leave water that's melted there, so that when you get to the hut, when you toured up there, those 4 or 5 miles, you have some water to be able to drink in the cabin. And then same thing, when you leave, make sure you melt some snow so there is potentially water there for the team to come back in. And maybe worst case scenario, if they didn't feel comfortable drinking it, they could heat it up, let it boil for a few minutes, and then hopefully they were good on that. And then, kind of depending upon, did you book out the whole hut, or did you just book out a few spots? Did you just pull 4 spots out of that 12-spot hut? You need to be considerate of others. Okay, so especially with the kitchen area and the quiet hours, guys. So just be considerate of other users, especially if you are sharing the hut with people you didn't book it with, because that happens, right? Sometimes you can book the whole hut. Some huts, Francie's, for example, that's an 18-person hut. Most of the time, people aren't booking out the whole spot, so they're kind of book out certain numbers of spots. And again, keep in mind COVID, because right now I believe a lot of the huts still are requiring you to book out the whole cabin. And then just kind of set the expectations, guys, and you should set the expectations for yourself and as well with the rest of your team here. But expect to be challenged. All right, especially if you've never done this before. We're out of our comfort zone. We're used to being home where there potentially is heat, running water, a food pantry, all this stuff. So we're kind of potentially getting out of our comfort zone. So expect to be challenged, expect to learn. All right, you're going to learn a lot about yourself, a lot about others out there. You're going to grow. Expect to be a participant. Like I mentioned before, guys, teamwork makes the dream work. This is not a solo thing going on here. We all need to work together to execute a proper hut trip. And again, a great way to do that is kind of breaking up these duties and responsibilities amongst the team. And expect to have fun. Hut trips are a blast. And like Ben said earlier at the beginning of this clinic here, hut trips are one of the best ways to experience not only just winter, but experience nature. We get out there, again, we get out of the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and we get out and we get to spend time with friends, family, or maybe other people we've never met before. And it brings us all closer. It brings us closer with nature. And it's an awesome time. So expect to have fun. And that's kind of a wrap, you guys, and as far as our how to plan a hut trip here. So hopefully you guys got some use and some benefit out of the clinic here. Again, I appreciate your guys' time. And from here, I am going to go ahead and kick it over to Mr. Ben.
Thanks so much, Justin, man. That was awesome. A ton of great info there. Really, really appreciate that, buddy. Any questions from the peanut gallery here? Do we want to ask Justin any questions? I've got, a few for sure. Is there any piece, that you would not go to a hut without? Is there like one piece of gear that you always remember? For me, it's some down slippers to throw on when I wake up in the middle of night to offload some liquids. And maybe that's outside. Maybe the restroom's not inside the hut. I used to carry like muck boots as well, and those are a lot. But some really nice like puff shoes, and even puff pants. I find myself rolling around in any piece of gear that you do not go to the hut without.
I mean, that's what I would have said as well, Ben. Because especially if we're out there skiing, like we're potentially out there most of the day. When we get back to the hut, we're tired, we're probably wet, we may have sweated, right? And so for me, when I get back to the hut, this isn't just hut trips, this is even like winter camping. It's like I want to get out of that gear and into my comfortable stuff, right? And so absolutely, like socks for me is huge. Like getting out of my wet socks and getting nice dry socks on, to me is like, and then beyond that, the hut slippers, like down booties, are great. When you guys are, again, it's going to vary upon the hut that you're using, the bathroom side of things, but in most huts, you are at least going to be number oneing outside. You are at the very least going to be hopping outside to gather snow for water and potentially wood for the firewood. So you do want to make sure that you ideally have something kind of waterproof, maybe. So for me, I don't have down, I have like a synthetic down booty. So if I do have to kind of maybe step into some deeper snow to collect, or I have to get out a little bit further to go to the restroom, they're not going to wet out, because down, when it gets wet, it doesn't retain the warming properties of like a synthetic down would. And then, like you mentioned as well, Ben, like a down or a synthetic pant as well. Like that's crucial for me. Like getting back to the hut after a day, even just touring up to the hut, getting comfortable, it's a morale booster for me. So definitely, like on that side, socks, keeping your feet nice and comfortable, and potentially getting out of your shell, like jacket for sure, but maybe pants. And we're always usually touring in base layers. So if you want to walk around in your base layers, that's totally cool. But I have like a pair of synthetic down shorts or fleece shorts or down pants that I like to hop into. So
Awesome. Yeah, I would even say, for me, depending on the length of the hut trip, I sometimes bring an extra liner for my boots as well. If I happen to have 2 liners for my snowboard boots, or my slippers, or my phantom slippers, let me be clear there. And not everyone has an extra pair of liners, but like I've run the same snowboard boots for years, and I just buy the same boots over and over. Like once you find a good pair of boots, you kind of stick with them. Or maybe you've run, Atomic Backland and then a phantom slipper, and you've got, a few pairs of liners, and they're pretty packable, and they also double as like a hut slipper, right, that you can walk around in. But then one thing you'll see as you get into hut trips is people are always pulling out their liners, and they're all packed around the fire, drying out, and they rarely get dry. I would even pack newspaper in mine to like try to dry them out here and there. But I found like if you just rotate 2 pairs of liners, that's a pretty good life hack for hut tripping for sure. And then I got another question for you. Do you have a favorite hut? Is there a hut that you went to that you just kind of blew your mind and you loved? For me, my like top huts that kind of really left an impression on me are the Opus Hut, down near Silverton, mainly because they cook food for you. And that was awesome. And they had beer and alcohol there, which was awesome. And it was like $5 a beer, $5 a shot, which was well worth, not having to haul all that stuff up there. Beautiful hut, amazing terrain. Another one that really left an impression on me is the Wheeler Hut up in Canada and Rogers Pass. Canada has an amazing hut system. The Sierras have an amazing hut system. It's not just Colorado that we have these great huts. Anywhere you're going, look up huts or even yurts. There's huts you can book, I think like in Yellowstone. And I've got a whole list of these places that I want to go, but the Wheeler Hut up on Rogers Pass was amazing access, and like no frills. It's like the opposite of the Opus Hut. It's like you're shoulder to shoulder on like little mats on the floor. but I mean, you can hike across some of the biggest glaciers, in Canada, if you know what you're doing, and you can tag some of the biggest peaks in Rogers Pass, and it's just mind blowing. Any huts that stick out in your mind as just epic?
Oh man, yeah, and I was gonna mention the yurts too. Like, it's not just cabins and huts. There's a lot of different yurts out there as well. I'd say for me, it's hard to pick one. I mean, for me, it kind of depends on what the objectives are. So if I just want to get out and bring my family out, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there was one in Monarch Pass, and it was just a private hut.
Mhm.
And you can rent out a whole lodge, and then there was a couple huts outside of that. We almost did our almost got married there, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of great skiing there, but it was great for like family and more of like a
Yeah.
low key side of things. I mean, I guess locally the Tundra Hut is really cool, and that's over near Guanella Pass. For
Yep.
spring skiing, we're actually going to be doing a ski split mode mountaineering course out of that one this April.
Cool.
So if anybody's interested and they're kind of at that level yet, that one is super cool. We snowmobile in, and there's just a cirque like almost right out the back door. There's just line after line after line, and like you said, they're everywhere, Ben. I stayed at some yurts with Ryan and 40 Tribes Backcountry in Kyrgyzstan, and that was probably one of the top hut / yurt experiences I've ever had. All of our gear got brought up via horseback, and we had some local Kyrgyzstanis cooking our dinner and our breakfast every morning. So there's so many options out there, and there's so many good huts and yurts. I think it just really depends on where you're at, what kind of location you're looking for, and what your overall objectives are for the day or
Right.
for the trip. So.
And for you guys in Colorado, I mean, there's probably a hut near you, within a couple of hours. And half of that fun is digging. Like I just found out about the Tundra Hut this year, was like sick, and there's, I mean, do some digging, Google them. Definitely, the 10th Mountain Huts are a great spot to start. But like those start booking out, like Justin says, a year in advance or in the summer. There is, you can become a member and you might get notified, of when those huts, actually go up for rent, which is nice. But yeah, like in the summers, I'm out at these huts a ton as well. It's not just a winter thing. I find they're almost easier to book in the summers, which is fantastic. There's a few of these 10th Mountain Huts that I Jeep up to in the summers, and nobody's ever there. It's fantastic, and so plus it helps me in the winter when I'm trying to get to one. But well, awesome, guys. Any more questions, let us know. You can always reach out to, info at Colorado Adventure Guides if you have questions. They personally do hut trips. And I would recommend, if you're looking to get into this, if you're looking to learn as much as humanly possible, book one of their trips. That's, one of the best ways. Go with a guide is what we always say. You're going to learn, way more in a multi-day hut trip with a guide than you would learn from, a decade of going on your own, frankly. So highly recommend you check out their website. They've got a ton of great hut trips, already out there. Where do you guys do hut trips at, Justin?
Yeah, so we partner with the Summit Huts and then some of the private huts. And so, we run 3-day intro to backcountry hut trips, which it kind of seems like, based on my earlier question with most of you guys had never hut tripped before, that would probably be a great outlet. And so we do those at the Sisters Hut, we do those at Francie's cabin, and we do those at Janet's cabin. So those are all out of the Summit Huts. And then we also do Avalanche Area 1 and Area 2 courses out of the huts. And so those ones we typically utilize Anna's cabin. And then we do ski and snowboard mountaineering hut trips as well. Like I had mentioned, this year we'll be doing it out of the Tundra Hut in April. So everything can kind of like beginner hut trip style all the way up to that more advanced ski splitboard mountaineering hut trip style. We're here to help. So like Ben said, definitely reach out if you guys have any questions. And even if you end up going with another outfit, or you're going with other friends and so forth, like we want to be a continual resource for everybody out there. So please remember that, reach out to us if it's, from a hut standpoint, to a terrain standpoint, from a snowpack standpoint. Like we want to be resources. We like to think of us all part of the backcountry family. So please reach out.
Love it. Awesome, man. Thanks again. All this will be a great resource to everyone. If there's anyone that wants to rewatch this stuff, it's going to be on YouTube. It'll be on our Facebook page. We'll make sure that we drop this episode if you want to share it with friends. I know the Weston crew, we've got a hut trip booked in January up at Vail Pass, and we're stoked to get out with the family. We're taking the snowcat up. We're going to have a lot of fun, and it's just one of the best experiences you can have in the backcountry. So we really do recommend it. If you have any questions for us, hit us up at info@westonbackcountry.com. And for more episodes of the Slay at Home series this year, you can check them out at the Weston Facebook page, westonbackcountry.com, and make sure you join that Weston Backcountry community. That is, our crew, our backcountry community. It's a great spot. I mean, you have access to guides like Justin. You have access to us. You have access to the big backcountry community from Washington to Maine to Canada down to the South America. So we've got a lot of great resources on there, a lot of great people. We highly recommend you join that. So yeah, thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode. We'll post up more details on the topic there in the Weston Backcountry community soon. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next time.